Welcome to Who We Become, Life Beyond Change. I'm your host, Amanda Lentz. This is a space for honest conversations about identity, resilience, and what it really means to rebuild after life changes. Here, we share stories of loss and hope, of challenge and courage, and of becoming someone new, even when life doesn't go as planned and the future feels uncertain. Whether you're navigating illness, grief, transition, or simply searching for meaning after change, you are not alone here. And I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin. Welcome back to Who We Become, Life Beyond Change. I'm excited to share today's guest with you. And today's guest did something that most of us fantasize about and very few of us actually do. She blew up the plan. After divorce, she left New York City, packed her bags, and moved to a tiny town in New Hampshire that she knew virtually nothing about, except that it was her dog's hometown. Yes, you heard that right. Betsy Vereckey is a journalist and author whose memoir, Moving to My Dog's Hometown, chronicles that wild, brave, and surprisingly hilarious leap into the unknown. Betsy's personal essays have appeared in the New York Times Modern Love column, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Food and Wine, and New York Magazine. She's been a guest on the Modern Love podcast, and her memoir is a Kirkus recommended pick. Betsy, welcome to Who We Become. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
So I have to start at the beginning because when I first heard your story, I thought, okay, this is either the most spontaneous thing I've ever heard or this woman is braver than she's letting on. So take me back to that moment. What led you to where you are now?
Yeah, I guess the short answer is that nothing was working out for me. I was going through a divorce. I was spending like $2,600 for this apartment in Park Slope, Brooklyn that was overrun with mice.
Wow.
And I had a job that was just so I was basically a copywriter, but I was like doing copywriting for insurance companies. It was just I had gotten so far from who I was or what I wanted to be doing um, with my life, and I honestly I was really scared to make a big change, so I kind of started changing small things, like, oh, what if I just moved to a different apartment, or what if I just took a job, like a similar job, but basically nothing I was doing was working. I was just unhappy. um and and basically an apartment opened up in this town in New Hampshire, Hanover, New Hampshire. It's where Dartmouth College is. It's kind of like, and I don't know if you've ever watched Gilmore Girls, but it kind of
Oh,
has
yes.
kind of has that vibe. And the only thing I knew about Hanover was that it was the town where my now ex-husband and I adopted our dog, Ronan. And Ronan was this breed of dog called the Glenavermal Terrier. And they look like little teddy bears. I always say it's like the cutest dog you've never heard of. Um, but yeah, so I had it was crazy. I actually had become over time. So by this point, um, my husband and I had picked up Ronan from this breeder in 2013, and then went back to New York. And then, like several years later, I had become friends with the dog breeder, who is this woman named Susan, and she's 25 years older than me, and is very opinionated and kind of has this outrageous personality. But we had become friends because she used to be a divorce lawyer, so she kind of like started helping me. My first impression of her, I just quite honestly, I didn't really like her because she was so opinionated. I'm like, oh my God, like who is that opinionated? Um, but yeah, she just really grew on me. And so I ended up moving into her house. Um, her and her husband had retired, so they wanted rental income, so they made part of their house, a spare apartment, so she was like, "Move here, come and be our first tenant." So I moved and I thought, "Okay, I'll be here 6 months or something until I figure out, what I really wanna do." And, the town just grew on me, and I was really able to experiment because the cost of living was cheaper, my rent was cheaper. I didn't have to work an a well-paying soulless job to make rent for an apartment I didn't like. So we really created space for me to just take some risks. I started freelancing for a couple small papers, which was awesome. Just these, like, small town wackadoodle stories. Um, it just really created space in my life, and then I ended up meeting someone up here about a year into my time here, and, I go into that in the book, but yeah, we have been together and we're married now, so I it was just this wild decision, and I never expected it to work out, but, I mean, that was almost 10 years ago. And I just have this whole new life, because I moved somewhere different and I had no idea. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, I have to do something. So
That is so incredible. And I love that you had moved to your dog's hometown because that's not something that, I would have ever thought to do. And here you are in a completely, in your next chapter in a completely different life.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I tell people, you know, it was actually pretty special. My husband and I now we actually Ronan passed last year, but we have 3 dogs and, that's awesome, but there's something really special about, a girl and her dog, and it was kind of just the 2 of us, and it was like it felt like it would be okay because I had him, so, yeah. Or felt like it was an easier decision to trust because I don't know, it was his hometown or something, but, yeah, whenever I would meet people in town, they would be like, "Well, how did you end up here?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is my dog's hometown." And, they were like, "What?" So,
But
yeah.
you never know where life's going to take you and
That's
how you'll find your way.
yeah.
And so you went from New York City, one of the most fast-paced, stimulating, always something happening places on earth, to a small town in New Hampshire. And you touched on this a little bit, but what was the culture shock actually like? And was there anything that you had expected about what small town life would be that just didn't happen or caught you by surprise?
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprised me was, how I was able to do so much with less. I when I lived in New York City, I had nice dresses that I wore to work, and I was like in wine clubs, and I would get like manicures, pedicures, and um there were all these things I did, I think, to kind of fill the sadness that I felt like was missing in my life. But I moved up here and, um, you know, once I started freelancing and kind of working from home, I was like, I don't really need that much. Like, I mean, you can see what I'm wearing today. I'm wearing flannel, and like spandex and, there's a chapter in the book where I go shopping for one pair of boots, and these were like the pair to kind of get me through winter and mud season. Um, so I think that was, definitely a happy shock that I realized I didn't need that much. Um, and wow, the seasonal change with like winter, that was I moved up here I moved up here in early October, and I don't know if you've ever spent time in New England, but it's, like, incredible here in the fall when the leaves change. Um, and I remember, driving up. I didn't have anything. I mean, I had a rental car, and I actually left a lot back in New York. And I had my dog, and we were crossing the bridge, crossing the Connecticut River, coming into Hanover, and it was just magical. I mean, like with the leaves like orange and yellow, and I was like, this is amazing. But what I didn't realize was that it was the beginning of a slow descent into winter darkness. so it was the first few months were pretty difficult, just honestly just like trying on things. Like I actually did interview for a job at a local college, and I was like, I don't really think this is going to be a fit. This is not what I want to do. Um and then yeah, just getting, cuz in New York the lights are always on, it's never dark in New York. Um and your neighbors are like right next to you. You can always hear something, but it was really quiet and it was really dark. So that took some getting used to. And now it's totally opposite. When I go back to New York, I just don't know how I ever lived there because it's just on all the time. So,
There
yeah.
was there's a section in your book that I thought was funny, just coming from New York, and it's the first time I think you were alone and you heard a noise and you weren't sure what was happening just because it was so different from New York, and it turned out to be a bear, I think, that
Yes.
was in the trash can,
Yeah.
and I was like, not something you'd ever see in, like,
No.
New York City.
No, yeah, that was pretty terrifying. And when it's like the middle of the night and you like, also like your mind goes to certain places and you start to imagine things. And um Susan and Jake were out of town, so I was like, "Oh my god, I'm alone and someone's trying to break in," and it was a bear. So yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
And so, what we talk about a lot is the after. You've made this huge life change, and you know, in the moment, do you think that in reflecting back, I mean, it was such a brave decision, but at that moment, did it feel brave? How were you feeling? I know you needed to make a change, but
Yeah.
that's a huge leap and a huge lifestyle change.
Yeah, I remember, well, 2 things. I remember thinking this is ridiculous to think that I thought this, but I remember thinking that after I actually signed my divorce papers, I actually thought that life was gonna get easier, because it took me a really long time to get to that point because, my marriage wasn't god awful terrible. You know, I it we were no longer a romantic match, but I knew that this person was like still my friend, my ex-husband. So it actually took a lot for us to get to that point to be like, we're great friends, but this marriage is not going to work. So I was like, oh, I got to that place where, I can like sign my divorce papers. Um, but it was like that was only the beginning. Because I really had to I had always been able to like move to a different neighborhood after a breakup in New York. I mean, I lived in New York for 11 years and I'd always kind of been able to reinvent myself, but this was the first time where I could not see myself in New York anymore. Um and I really thought about it a lot. I'm definitely a thinker before I do anything. And at some point I realized that was just not going to work. Like I couldn't think my way out of it. I had to actually do something. And um I didn't want to do the same thing over again. Like I didn't want to take another office job in a different city. I actually wanted a completely new life. And I remember that Susan, who had been saying like, "Oh, come to New England, like live in our house." And she had said this actually a few times. And I was like, well, that's kind of crazy. And I ran it past a few friends. And of course, your friends are always going to tell you, no, you don't want to do that because they want to keep you close. They want to keep you in
Of
New York.
course.
Um, so I really had to kind of break away. And I remember the night I made the decision. I was I think I was actually out walking Ronan in the park, and I messaged Susan and I was like, I'm coming. Um, and so that was it. I mean, once I had kind of put it in motion, it was really easy to, once you cut ties with something, it's a lot easier to start cutting ties in other places. I was nervous to quit my job because I didn't have another job. I had like nothing. I mean, I really just had a place to live in a town that I remember being kind of cute. Um, so I think sometimes we just have to make a choice. But at the time I was paralyzed to make a choice because I almost didn't trust myself anymore because it seemed like I was on a roll of making bad decisions. Like I had married this person who I thought was going to be my forever person and wasn't. I moved to this apartment that I thought was going to be great, and then it was like infested with mice, and I couldn't stand the thought of moving again. Um, so yeah, so it actually behooved me to make a giant change that would change everything. And I think that if one thing had worked in my life in New York, I might have stayed, honestly. Like if I had met somebody, I went on a lot of dates and like nothing worked out. It was really like the universe was saying, honey, just
Yeah.
we're you just got to go. Like we're not, if you can keep doing these things in New York, but we're just going to keep shutting doors for you. So why don't you just get out of New York? So um yeah, so
That's amazing, and
yeah,
I think that's so important for people to hear too, is, you have to take stock in what's working, what's not, and, when we think of someone being brave, I think we almost romanticize it a little bit where, we have this intentional, clear-eyed thing or process, but sometimes it just looks like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that I can't stay here,
yeah.
and you just sometimes just have to take that leap.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with tarot at all, but I keep thinking about this a lot. There's a card called the Fool. And if you look at it, it's this man who is about to step off a cliff, but he looks really happy doing it. So that's kind of what it felt like. It was just like, I don't know if this is gonna work out, but it actually feels right. And um, there it was scary, but it wasn't like there was a lot at stake because I had enough income to kind of cover my rent. And I was um going upstairs to watch Jeopardy with them. Like these people had kind of become my surrogate parents. So I knew they were looking out for me. Yeah, so
I love that, and
yeah.
so, you moved and now there's a new love story, because your memoir, Moving to My Dog's Hometown, isn't just about you and Ronan, but now there's a husband in the picture.
Yeah.
And so can you share that story? How did you meet?
Yeah. So I thought I lived here a year, and I thought, well, a year is a good amount of time to get my bearings and experience the seasons. And then I thought, because there's just not a lot of people here. It's the town we live in now, it's like, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 people, and Hanover is 11,000. Um and so I was when I met Andrew, I was already starting to think, well, I might have to leave to meet somebody because I'm just not having a lot of luck. I was going on the apps, and that was not working either. Um, and I went to this bar in town called Pine, which is kind of like the local watering hole. It's in this really old inn. And I was with a friend, and it was really crowded that night. It was in the fall. It was literally like a month, or I'm sorry, a year to the day. And there were 2 seats that became available, and my friend was like, "Oh, grab those seats." And so we sat next to this guy, and my friend, she had a boyfriend, and she kind of looked at him and noticed that he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. And so she put me next to him thinking, "Oh, he might be her." She just knew. And that was kind of it. So I met Andrew, who's my love interest in the book, and I the the karmic coincidence was that Andrew was going through a divorce of his own. I was kind of I was in a better place than he was. Like you know, uh I think I called him like stage 0 of his divorce. Like
Yep.
he was just, um so, I mean, it was like red flag, I don't know how this is going to work, but I ended up taking a chance on him as well. And it worked out. And so we've been together ever since. We were a little gun shy about getting married again because we had been through it with our, divorce. And we got married in March. It was our 2-year anniversary. Um so yeah, again, it's a common theme in my life. I remember um, you know, Andrew proposed, and I love Andrew, but I wouldn't say it was like super romantic because it was like we were really talking about it. Like, do we really want to do this? And like why should we get married when we like have a house and like why do we need it? Um and then yeah, we again, it was like I just realized that I couldn't think my way through this. Like um I had to take another risk. And it's been great. It's actually been exactly the same except I wear a wedding ring now.
Right.
So,
Well, and I think going into a relationship too, after you've almost had you romanticize the idea of, marriage. But then after you go through a divorce, you take a different perspective and
yeah.
a different approach perhaps in entering into a new relationship
Yeah.
or marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we really the first time I was engaged and got married, I would say it was a little more traditional. And then this time around I actually wanted to use my mom's engagement ring cuz I was like let's save money, let's save money, like don't go out and buy a diamond, like let's repurpose it. Um because it's a small town and everybody knows each other, we have a very good friend who works at the jewelry store in town. So we like worked with her on like the design of the ring. So again, like no huge surprises. But in a way it was actually nice to have it feel so different the second time.
Sure.
Yeah. It was like romantically practical. So,
I love that. What a great way to describe it too.
yeah.
And so your memoir,
Mhm.
it came out in January, and I will say personally I have enjoyed every minute of it.
Thank
It's
you.
like chatting with a girlfriend, it's just real relatable. And so it's been described as a feel-good story with some bite. And I love that
Yeah.
because you use you've talked about using humor as a tool for coping. And I'd like to, understand a little bit more about that because grief and humor feel like they're in conflict, like they shouldn't work together, but I don't think they actually are. So what's your thought about that and what prompted you to, really integrate humor into your grief and your memoir?
Yeah. Somebody once said that um, one of the recipes for humor is time plus tragedy. So, like having time away from whatever happened to you that you can kind of step back and see the humor in it. Um, and I think that was really the case when I was writing it. Um, I was very fortunate to have Susan as a character because she just would say these things that were actually one of the things I think can be really funny is when somebody speaks the truth. Like sometimes the truth can just be really funny. And someone just said the other day, like, wow, Susan is really Susan is really funny. And I was like, well, I made her funny, but she did say these things. And I remember we would be like sitting at her table and she would say these things and I would just be like writing them down or like putting them in my phone, like just, oh my God, I have to use this later. Um yeah, but it has I have been one of the themes of my life is that I I often have to write myself out of tragedy or I was saying earlier I have to like think about it um yeah, in just like kind of writing my way out of things. And yeah, definitely with humor, sometimes if you step away from something long enough, you can see the humor in it. And sometimes I find that it doesn't even take that much, like, when I'm, like, writing or I'm reading someone else who I think is funny, like, 1 sentence or 2 sentences, just a little, like, a little humor or, like, a cloud to kind of lighten the rest of the piece, I think can really go can really go a long way, and I can definitely go to the sad places too, sometimes I think about like comedians, even, like Robin Williams, who was considered one of the like funniest people, but there was also some sadness that he was working through. So, yeah, I agree. I think that there's something about the two. It's like the light and the dark or the yin and the yang,
Yeah.
just kind of balancing each other out.
I love that, and
Yeah.
I think your book captures that so well because there is a version of healing that is serious and somber, and that's how some people process. But then there's also this other version where you're laughing through your tears and you're able to take a step back. And I think that's also a version of healing. And I think the way that you've written your book just captures that so
Thank you.
well. And was there anything you were nervous to put in your book or anything you debated leaving out as you were really bearing your soul and your life and your experience to the world?
Yeah. I was really worried about writing about my marriage and my divorce. Um and I mean I wrote mini versions in so many different ways. And I think it actually helped me discover some things that I think what caused the demise of my marriage. Um I I think I was looking for a tidy answer, and I don't think there was one. I think it was a bunch of little things. I am not a confrontational person, and I probably should have been more when things kind of started to go wrong for us. I mean, we did all the traditional things like therapy, um, but yeah, and so yeah, I had a lot of anxiety about writing about that, but I'm glad that I did because it really helped me figure some things out. It definitely that I don't want to do in my second marriage. I want to be more confrontational. I don't know if that's the right word, but more acknowledging when things aren't going right and not trying to
Absolutely.
push things under the rug. Um I did send the chapters that my ex-husband was in to him. Um, I didn't really want to I didn't want to have to worry about that, like, after it was published. Like, if there was something, I was not going to change it for him, but I also knew that this was my experience of what happened. And if by chance he was like, well, that's not how it was for me, like I would be curious, like if he experienced it differently or like I would be curious, but I wouldn't change it for him. I'm really glad I did that because his response was very generous. Um, and that's one thing I have said to some people I know, that sometimes memoirists can be nervous about, oh, I wrote about my not so great relationship with my mom. And I know every situation is different, but I think for me at least, it was so nice to once that was actually, I felt the burden of that. Like and I think part of the reason I felt the burden was because I don't think we ever really had a, you know, um, like a very serious, come to Jesus conversation where this is why I think our marriage didn't work. I mean, we did have conversations, but yeah, so once I had kind of moved past that, I felt like I could go full force into the publication and then deal with all of, those the trials and tribulations of publication, but at least that was off my shoulders. So
Absolutely. And
yeah.
what would you want readers to walk away with, especially anyone who is maybe in the middle of their own reroute or contemplating change at this moment?
Yeah, I would say just try on some different things. Because you never really know where something is going to lead. If you're interested in like music lessons or like some kind of interest, like starting a podcast, I would just say like try it and follow it, because you don't know, like you just don't know where it's going to lead or what it might become. Um, and and actually do the thing. Sometimes for me, this is a good trick. I sometimes have to literally trick myself into doing something. Like, so for example, I've never done podcasts before this, and I'm definitely more of like a behind the scenes person. And so I worked with, I was like, but I know that I need to do that to like help with my book, and it would be a good skill for me. And so I sent an email to somebody and started working with her on podcasts. So I kind of like tricked myself into like doing it,
Hmm.
because once you just send the email, and kind of like lock yourself into something that you're, scared to do, because then you have to do it. So yeah.
I love that. And I think it just goes back to that, the conversation earlier about bravery. It shows up in so many different ways and, just putting yourself out there and seeing what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, Betsy, thank you so much. This conversation has been everything I hoped it would be just from reading your book: funny, honest, and genuine. And thank you for being here and for sharing your story so openly. And so, where can people find the book? How can they follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. You could go to your local bookstore or I think bookshop. And if your local bookstore doesn't have it, they can probably order it for you. I know Amazon has it as well. I also did a recording on Audible, like I did it myself. Also
Very cool.
something that I have never done before, but that was a lot of fun. Um, yeah, and then, my website is my name, and I'm on Instagram. Yeah, I think if you actually Google, Betsy Writer Vermont, I'm right up there because there's, like, just not many of us. I might be the only one, so, I know I have a tricky last name, so, um, yeah, so yeah.
Perfect. And we will I'll include all of the information to about your book, your Instagram, all of your socials so people can connect. And so I would highly recommend reading the memoir. It is truly inspiring and funny and just such a good read. And so, to everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, I'd love if you would share it with someone who's in the middle of a reroute right now, because sometimes the most helpful thing we can do for someone is to hand them a story and say, you're going to be okay. And it might even be funny someday. So thank you for listening, Betsy. Thank you so much for joining me today. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep becoming who you're meant to be. Thank you for joining me today on Who We Become. I hope this conversation reminded you that growth isn't always easy, but it is always meaningful. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It truly helps these stories reach those who may need a reminder they are not alone. Remember, what happened to you is part of your story, but it is not the end of it. You are not defined by what happened to you. You are shaped by how you rise. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep becoming who you're meant to be.